My name is Michael Blaine. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to welcome you to this month's edition of our Public Affairs series. And for this event, we've partnered with St. Paul Smart Trips. And during the event, I'd like to encourage you not to put your phones away, but to keep them out and engage with us using social media. But before we get started, I'd like to thank our host, 317 on Rice Park, as well as introduce one of our presenting sponsors, Comcast. And with me today from Comcast is Emmett Coleman. Mr. Coleman is the Vice President of Government Affairs for Comcast. I'd like to take this time to introduce Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Michael. You know, as a lifelong Minnesotan, I have to say, first and foremost, go wild. I can't start any conversation these days without saying that. As a dedicated St. Paul board member, chamber board member, I hope you're all planning to stick around and spend your money downtown St. Paul tonight. And as a lifelong St. Paulite, I would also say if you're planning to go wilding instead of wild, you can do that in Minneapolis. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and I want to give a special thanks to all of the sponsors. This presenting sponsors are Comcast, Gulf Public, and the University of St. Thomas. The corporate sponsors are Grand Casino and Platinum Bank. Contributing sponsors are Owl Bookkeeping, CFO Services, and Securian. And a special thank you to our event partner today, St. Paul Smart Trips. And with that, I would like to welcome up the next person, which is Jessica Treat from St. Paul Smart Trips. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Jessica Treat with St. Paul Smart Trips. I also just want to, this is a joint event, so not only are you at the Public Affairs series with the Chamber, but you are also at St. Paul Smart Trips Transportation Summit. You have had two events at the same time. So I just want to take a little bit of time to talk about who St. Paul Smart Trips is. I think there's a lot of people that have come for the Public Affairs series with the Chamber who may not know who we are. Our mission is to improve access and mobility for people for those who travel in and around St. Paul. We're a nonprofit. We've got really great transportation options in St. Paul. We've got Metro Transit, great transit service, a train coming on June 14th to open. We've got car sharing, bike sharing. So we partner with all these people to let people know that these options exist, and so you can do something other than drive alone. We work with workplaces to let people know, help you provide transportation benefits for your employees. We have regional promotions like Switch My Trip, Bike Week, that's happening. Those are both happening now. Those are sort of promotional events to sort of get you inspired to try something different. We reward people for trying something different, kind of that extra hump to just do something different and new. We've got programs, internal programs like Parking Smart and ZAP Twin Cities. Those are programs. Parking Smart is a subsidized carpool program. ZAP Twin Cities is a bike commuter incentive program, so those things you can get engaged in. Neighborhoods program. We do work in neighborhoods. We'll meet you either at your workplace or in your neighborhood and get you to know what your options are. Right now we're doing an exciting program in the Frogtown neighborhood of St. Paul in partnership with the Kitty Anderson Youth Science Center at the Science Museum, and there's a crew of 12 youth that are hired in that neighborhood to engage with their, learn about transportation and then engage with their neighbors and their families and try to help shift attitudes and behaviors about transportation. And then we do advocacy. When we find that there's a need, we engage in advocacy to try to shift policy or affect some change. St. Paul Walks and Women on Bikes are two of our advocacy efforts that you may hear about. And then a couple events. I have to put a plug in for the Future of 4th Street that's happening on Thursday. Please come down. We'll be closing down 4th Street from Minnesota to Wakuta on Thursday and kind of showcasing what that would be like if it was a bike walk street, bringing in pop-up cafes and things like that. That's something that we're working on with our Women on Bikes initiative. So please come down and visit that. That's starting around the lunch hour and then into the evening. And then in September, there's going to be Open Streets, the second annual St. Paul Open Streets, and that's happening September 21st up on University Avenue. So look for that as well. That's my staff. We're only a staff of 6. We partner with a lot of people that are tabling over on the side are our partners that we work with to get the word out about what transportation options are, and we're happy to work with you in your workplace to get people thinking differently about how they get around. So thanks for coming to our Transportation Summit. I am now going to say a little bit about the Placemaking Residency. This is the 5th event of 17 that's happening this week, and that make up the 3rd Annual Placemaking Residency. Patrick Sieb from the Riverfront Corporation is the sponsoring organization. Thanks for coming, Patrick. As I said, this is the 3rd year that the Riverfront Corporation has invited a renowned placemaking expert to our community to engage groups like this in a week of thinking about how our cities can grow and evolve. This year, there are 17 events on the schedule for the week, each one driven by a unique group, and each of the sponsoring groups has share a commitment to make our cities better. Before we get on with the program, I would like to take a moment to recognize the sponsors who have made the Placemaking Residency possible. The lead sponsor is the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. And there's also been generous support from the Center for Prevention at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota, Central Corridor Funders Collaborative, the McKnight Foundation, Science Museum of Minnesota, University of Minnesota Institute on the Environment, City of Wayzata, Metropolitan Council, The Line, St. Catherine University, and the St. Paul Hotel. So, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to Janelle Waldeck. She's going to come up and introduce our main speaker. Janelle is the director of the Center for Prevention at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota. The Center for Prevention at Blue Cross delivers on the organization's long-term commitment to improve the health of all Minnesotans by tackling the leading root causes of preventable disease: tobacco use, lack of physical activity, and unhealthy eating. Funded through proceeds from Blue Cross's historic lawsuit against the tobacco industry, Blue Cross collaborates with organizations statewide like St. Paul Smart Trips through Women on Bikes and the Frogtown Neighborhood Program and Frogtown Youth Crew initiatives to increase health equity, transform communities, and create a healthier state. Here's Janelle.
Thank you, Jessica, and I'm very pleased to be here today to play the special role of getting to introduce our keynote speaker, Gil Penalosa. Gil is really an internationally known placemaking expert and really a valued influencer of the work that we've been doing at Blue Cross for many years on the subject of active living. We've had the privilege of hosting Gil a number of times over about a 7-year period. We've had him speak at events and work with folks in the Twin Cities, in Alexandria, in Duluth. And really, for me and my team, we really have considered Gil to become quite an honorary Minnesotan, and we're really glad that he's here again. As executive director of 880 Cities, which is based in Toronto, Gil advises decision makers and communities around the world on how to create vibrant cities and healthy communities for everyone, regardless of social, economic, or ethnic background. Gil rose to prominence through his work as Commissioner of Parks, Sport, and Recreation in Bogota, Colombia. And in that role, he led the design and development of over 200 parks. Gil's team, and really one of the things he is most well known for, also initiated the new Ciclavia, a program that opened up Bogota's streets so that 1 million people can walk, run, skate, and bike in Bogota's cities on the roads every Sunday. And today it's internationally recognized and emulated, and it really has been and was the model on which we designed our Open Streets program that happens around the state. Gil is one of a select few Pied Pipers within the active living community design movement with an uncanny ability to inspire. He's worked with more than 150 cities around the world on the very issues that we're here talking about in St. Paul today. So please join me in welcoming Gil.
It's so nice to be here. I want to thank everyone for coming. And actually, the Twin Cities, so many twins all over the place. So it's quite nice. This is how we see the twins. But of course, we also know that twins are not always alike. Sometimes there's a few differences. I'm not going to use the podium because I want you to take a look at the photos, so I think it might be better if I stand around here. But one of the things that I find is this is what you think of winter here in the Twin Cities. because this has been the worst winter in the last 20 years. This is a big mental barrier that you have towards sustainable mobility. I've been in 15 winters in Toronto, but this is not what the winter in Minneapolis or St. Paul is really like. But it's something that is very worrisome. Actually, that's why people say, oh, that's why we don't walk or bike, because it's too cold. And that reminded me when I was doing some work in January of last year in the Caribbean, and they said, oh, we cannot walk because it's too hot, or bike. And then I got on the plane, and I went to Canada. Yeah. They said it's too cold. So weather is more than anything a mental issue. This is maybe what you think, but this is not the Twin Cities every day of the year. And actually, you only have, this is 100-year history, since 1880. Since 1880, the average snowfall is 52 inches. The median is just 43. It's nothing. It's like this much over 5 months. That's nothing. So more than anything, it's a mental issue. So, but what happens when it's a mental issue is that you got 15 horrible days of the year. But then we plan the cities around those 15 horrible days. And we mess up the rest of the year. We do all these like skyways that they are like a gigantic vacuum that sucks the life out of the city. And then instead, you gotta, today, what a wonderful day. Yesterday I went running on Sunday. It's beautiful. You got over 200 wonderful days of the year. But if you plan around the 15 horrible days, you're gonna mess these up once. If you plan around the 200 nice days, then even the snow days are not gonna look as bad. And you're gonna be able to enjoy them. So this is a mental shift. We gotta learn from the Danish. The Danish said there's no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. So you put on your gloves and your proper boots and so on, and you keep going. It might be raining, it might be snowing, and people of any ages. But it's also about priorities. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about Copenhagen, because Copenhagen is very similar to St. Paul and Minneapolis. It's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer, snows, a similar income level, similar education level. They bike a little bit more. One of the things they do is have priorities right. When it snows, first they plow the sidewalk, then they plow the bikeway, then they plow the streets. The pedestrian is the most vulnerable. We want people to take public transit, but how are they going to take public transit if the sidewalks are a mess? How are they going to be able to walk to school, the children, if the sidewalks are not clean? So if we want to really have sustainable mobility, we really got to improve our priorities. I mean, why is this important when this week we're talking about placemaking? Because perception becomes reality. So we really got to change our mindsets. I mean, when we look at the Twin Cities from the air, or actually any city in the world, the largest public space are the streets. And the public space, I mean the space that belongs to the public. Everybody, young and old and rich and poor. So how are we going to use it? Here in Eros, there used to be a river going through here. And about 40 years ago, they were thinking efficiency, so they built a road. But now people are not thinking efficiency. People are thinking quality of life. We live in an ever more globalized world. And in a globalized world, the best people, they can live anywhere they want. However you define best, it can be the best engineers or medical doctors or party organizers or carpenters or musicians or what, they can live anywhere. So every day you gotta wake up in St. Paul and Minneapolis thinking, how can we retain our best people? You have a negative deficit of millennials leaving the Twin Cities than coming into the Twin Cities. So this is something really worrisome. Because, for example, you got fantastic universities and lots of colleges. So that should be like a trap. You got those young people here for 4 years, show them a fantastic city, and then they're going to stay. But if you don't show them a fantastic city, then they're going to go to Denver, they're going to go to Portland, they're going to go to other places. So this is critical. I mean, quality of life, the thing that we're talking about today, is about how to create an area that is competitive. By the way, let me clarify. I know that the Twin Cities are pretty good. Actually, I think that is your biggest problem, that you're already pretty good. And sometimes it's harder to move from good to great than from bad to great. But I think it's time that you stop playing with the little leagues and you start playing with the big boys and girls. I mean, if you do a list of cities that are worse than the Twin Cities, even in North America, you can have 1,000 cities that are worst. But if you benchmark yourself against those, eventually, in the short term, it's good for your ego because you say, oh, we are so good, we're better. But in the long term, you're going to look like those. But if you benchmark yourself with the best cities in the world, also eventually you're going to look like those. So when you're talking about cycling, you should be benchmarking yourself with Copenhagen. And you should be benchmarking yourself with the Portlands of the world, and the Vancouvers, and the Melbournes, and the Berlins, and the all of this, the Amsterdams. I mean, the Twin Cities have the potential to be a world-class city. I mean, better than any. So don't benchmark yourself with the Houstons of the world. So they're not going to invite me to Houston anymore. No, but actually they know that they realize. But you know, so what did they do, these people? They brought out, 7 years ago, they brought out the river. Why? Because those carpenters and musicians and engineers and doctors, they don't like to live in this city, but they do like to live in this one. So cities are moving there. We got to decide, are we building streets for cars or streets for people? Do we want our streets to look like car storage or actually help create community? I mean, this morning I was at the big mall at Bloomington. I saw a lot of parking lots like this. Again, this is like the same as the skyline. Vacuum, sucking the life out of the city. What if we put street level activity and then we put the parking in the second, third, and fourth story? I mean, change is difficult, of course. And doesn't happen by consensus. When they were thinking whether to make this pedestrian, people like this restaurant said, oh, you know, if the cars don't park in front of my restaurant, I'm going to go broke. You have to listen to everybody. But at the end of the day, what is the general interest? Change will never happen by consensus. If you want change to be unanimous, you have to water down change so much that it's not going to be change any longer. So listen honestly and then make a decision. They made it pedestrian. You think anyone went broke? 10,000 people buy more food than 93 cars. So it's about changing mindsets. And this is why all of us are here. I mean, I love talking to children because then they start thinking about new ideas and people say, oh, when you work with elementary kids, you are talking about the future. No, they're not the future, they're the present. Because if we educate the children very, very well, they go home and they educate their parents. And that's what we need, how to get into people's houses. If you set up a public meeting tonight about how to improve the sidewalks in the Twin Cities, maybe 2 people will show up. But if you talk to the children and you get them to do coloring books and one street that is horrible without sidewalks or crosswalks and without trees and benches and the other one with all of these elements, and then you say, you know, why don't you discuss this with some adult at home? You got into people's homes talking about some of these issues. So it's about, you know, the kids, they teach them how to recycle and then they go home and they say, Dad, don't mix the water bottles with the papers. That's why the children are so great. I mean, look at these children. They were doing, I asked them, do the community you want to have when you have your parents' age. Almost all of it is a park. This one is doing, he said, I want fewer cars and more people walking and more people cycling. And he drew an area for pedestrians, for cyclists, for buses, and for cars. He doesn't know at 13 how fast people walk. But he knows that if we mix pedestrians and cyclists, the pedestrian is going to get injured. If we mix cyclists with cars, the cyclist is going to get injured. So each one needs their own separate space. And then he drew public parks and low buildings with street level activity. I was doing a workshop with the PhD students in South Korea a couple of months after this workshop. And I told the students, the PhD students that are very, very smart, I said, look, I hope you study very hard because now the 13-year-olds can summarize Urban Planning 101 in one drawing. And actually, if we did, when I was this morning at Bloomington, this is the kind of things I was showing. If they did communities like this, it would be pretty good communities. Not 40-story buildings where people have more in common with the birds and the planes than with people. We can have the same densities in 4 or 5 or 6-story buildings next to each other, than on 40-story buildings 100 yards apart. But then it's more and more human. So I mean, all of this has to do with placemaking, because by places we're talking about the sidewalk and the street and the corner and the plaza and the market and so on. It's about creating cities for all. That's why I'm so grateful to the St. Paul Riverfront Corporation and to all of you for coming, and all of the sponsors and co-sponsors. I mean, what is 180 cities? 180 cities is not just about walking or cycling. These are the means, not the end. The end is how can we contribute to create vibrant cities with healthy communities, where the citizens are going to be happier, enjoying parks and public places. And when I'm in any city, they always ask, oh, Gil, is this intersection safe? Can my children walk or bike to school? Can my grandparents walk or bike to take public transit or to buy eggs or milk? You don't have to be a transportation engineer. 3 simple steps for this. Step number 1, think of a child around 8 years old that you love, your son or daughter or sister or grandchild. Once you have this boy or girl in your mind, then go to step number 2. Think of an older adult that you also love. And when you have the child and the older adult in mind, then go to step number 3. Would you send them across that intersection? Would you send them walking or cycling to the store or to the school or to take public transit? If you would, it's because it's safe enough. If you would not, it's because it's not, and we gotta do it better. I mean, what if everything that we did in the Twin Cities, in the streets, in the sidewalk, in the crosswalk, had to be fantastic for the 8 and for the 80? It's not from 8 to 80. No, it's that like an indicator species. If we do things great for an 8 and great for an 80, it's gonna be good from 0 to 100. I mean, we gotta stop building the cities as if everybody had 30-year-old and athletic. And we gotta build cities for all. That's the concept. This is about sustainable happiness. We all love to have that age and do it. See, some things are, things like this, happiness, which is one of the things about you using sustainable transportation. It provides happiness. I know that happiness is hard to define, almost impossible to measure, but it's our goal in life. And I know we seem to be facing a perfect storm. We got traffic congestion, and we got climate change, and we got obesity crisis, and we got economic crisis, and all seems at the same time. In addition, the population is growing, and we are living longer. So all of this, I mean, the population is growing. In the US, we're going to have 130 million people in the next 30 years. 130 million. I mean, not only do we got to improve the cities that we have today, we got to create great cities for these 130 million additional people. In the US, you're going to be building 50 million homes in the next 30 years. Can you imagine? I mean, just to put it into context, what does it mean? In 30 years, 50 million homes is the same as all of the homes of Canada, England, Switzerland, Chile, and Denmark together. In 30 years. So, I mean, the population in Minnesota has been growing. Not as fast as other areas of the US, but continues to grow. All of the areas here in red or brown are over 20% in the next 30 years. And the dark ones are over 30%. Huge growth. So how is it going to be done? I mean, if you had a magic wand and you could redo 30% of any city, even the best city in the world, you could do it even better. That's the possibility. It's the opportunity. And we're living longer. Look at this. The people over 60 used to be 6%. Now it's almost 25%. It's going to go to 25%. 1 in 4. The baby boomers. I mean, and we gotta get ready for the baby boomers. It's amazing that our cities are so horrible, so mediocre for older adults, when this is something that was totally predictable. We knew the baby boomers were coming 60 years ago. And then 50 years and 40 years. If there is anything easy to predict, it's population. Whoever in their 50s today, 10 years from now are going to be in their 60s. It's not too hard. You don't have to be a statistician. And look, in the next 30 years, the green is the population over 65 in Minnesota, and the other one is over 85. Look how it's growing, the population. So we got to catch up in many places. So we got to reinvent what we think about old people. After hundreds of thousands of years, the life expectancy 200 years ago was just, in the US, was 39. Actually, this is the life expectancy. No country in the world had a life expectancy above 45. Now, we doubled the life expectancy. It's amazing. Actually, now no country in the world has a life expectancy below this. Why? Thanks to medical advances on drugs and engineers, that they put sewage and water and clean. Because that's what people were dying of 200 years ago. People now are dying of lifestyle-related issues, heart attacks, respiratory problems, anxiety, depression. So all of us have to work on this. The planners, the transportation people, but also public health is critical. Education, economic development, the private sector, the public sector, everybody. We learn how to survive. But when we see all of these issues, it's very clear that now we got to learn how to live. And this is about the built environment. So we got to recreate places, and there are some ingredients. Like if we're going to do a pasta, you boil water, you put on the pasta, you have spiceless pasta. And people do not like spiceless pasta. So you get ingredients, you make a nice pasta, and then people are going to be happier. Also, people do not like spiceless cities. And so, some people tell me, Gil, what is a spiceless city? Well, here are a couple of examples. This building has won a lot of awards, architectural awards. Nice places are not the ones that win the most architectural awards. Some parks, you go to a park and they say, this has won so many awards. Who cares? It's the parks or the public places or the sidewalks that are more used by people, more diverse people. Look, this won an award. So this is spiceless, this is spiced. Spiceless is used only a few hours a week. Spiced, every day of the week. Our friend from Boston, spiceless, spiced. You get it? It's not about the money, It's about having children, being able to work. This park costs a lot of money. What do you do there? Nothing. You go there, you take a photo, and you never go back. This one costs very little money, and you go back day after day after day because there's so much activity. So these are the kind of things of spice and spiceless that is very important. And when we have more millennials living, we got to worry because we got to have spiced cities everywhere. So what are the ingredients? Most important, walking. Walking is the most important because everybody's pedestrian. The young, the old, the rich, the poor. Every single trip begins and ends walking. I don't see any cars in this room. So I guess some of you walk to the car. Other people walk to transit. Others walk to their bikes. Others walk to places. So pedestrian got to be the priority, but have not been the priority. This is how we've been building cities. We've been building cities for thousands of years, but it's been only in the last 80 that we've been building thinking more on car mobility than on people's happiness. We're telling this guy every day, you are a second-class citizen. It's an insult. We got to have really nice sidewalks, bikeways, public transit. Part of it is because it's safer, but part of it just as important because we need to dignify the pedestrian. You need to dignify the cyclist. We need to dignify. Guys like this, they get killed and they say, oh, it was jaywalking. In the US, a person walking gets hit by a car over 100,000 per year. 100,000. Over 4,000 are killed. Over 100,000 are hit and injured, reported to the police. This is crazy that people assume that that's a normal fact of life. And similar to pedestrians are people cycling. I just say cycling is a more efficient way of walking. If we're going to go half a mile, you walk. But if you're going to go 3 miles, you bike. And if you're going to go 20 miles, then you go take public transit. That's why I think that the three of them got to work in sync. But public transit, you can be building the green line, the blue line, the red line, whatever line. Public transit will never pick you up in front of your house and drop you off in your place of destination. So if the city is not walkable or bikeable, public transit is not going to work as well. So then the public space becomes very critical. And then we're going to have sustainable mobility. I mean, walking, cycling, and transit, they got to be best friends. They work together. I'm not saying that this is the future of the car industry. But the way we use cars is changing rapidly. Not even the car companies have been forecasting. In the last 2 years, the 18 through 24 purchased fewer cars than in the last 40. Even fewer got even their driver's license than in the last 40. Now, for the millennials, the car is not a status symbol. Status symbol is to have an iPad. They'd rather, instead of having a car, they'd rather pay more rent and live in a nice place, walkable, than having a car. They'd rather get a backpack and go to Australia or India than having a car. So this is changing very, very rapidly. And also we're having electric cars and car sharing and all of these things. But by the way, car sharing is great. But car sharing works only if the city is walkable, bikeable, and has good public transit. 3 weeks ago, I was at the Google campus on a think tank. And the woman that created the SIP card, she told me, I said, tell me a little, I want to learn about a SIP card. And she said the most important thing is that the only places where it works is if it's walkable, bikeable, and has good public transit. Because the car sharing is the complement, the ideal complement for people to be able to downsize from 2 cars to 1 or from 1 to 0. So that those 20% of the trips that they will still want to do on a car, they can still do it. I mean, so it's changing. I mean, we're buying things through the internet. How do we get it? We don't get it through the internet. So FedEx and UPS are hiring thousands of people on bikes because now they got a big truck that comes into the city and the bikes do their door-to-door delivery. It's about changing mindset. Before they used to say, here we cannot put transit because it doesn't fit, it's a narrow road. That was the old mentality. But across the street, now I know the old mentality, the dinosaurs, the engineers that used to be dinosaurs, are there in the Science Center. They have an exhibition. But the new engineers, regardless of the age, they might be 80, 60, 20, the new breed of engineers are saying it's not about moving cars, it's about moving people. So if there is not enough space for transit and for cars, then we get rid of the cars and we leave transit and people walking. So it's changing people's mindsets, which is so exciting. And it's just timely when we are going to be building 50 million homes in the next 30 years. So how are we going to do it? I mean, people walking got to be the priority. In a city similar to St. Paul and Minneapolis, they told me everybody's going to get out of their car because we bought these new buses. You think anyone is going to get out of their bus when this is what the bus stop looks like? I mean, walking, cycling, and transit got to be a better option. It has to be cheaper or faster or more comfortable or more convenient, or people are not going to switch. This is a school with 1,500 students. So I decided to show the mayor that was telling me about the buses. I showed that mayor this other one. And he said, Gil, why are you showing me this bus stop? I said, because maybe this is what the bus stop would look like if the decision makers use the bus service. We got to get the decision makers using the bus service. At least once a year. How about telling the mayor of Minneapolis and St. Paul, either, not one day, the week of the Earth Day or the week of the Environment Day or 1 week of the year, have every elected official and senior level staff in the city, and hopefully many private sector companies say, during this week, we're not going to use the car. That way they will realize how good it is or not the system. They will see the faults. And that would be really important. I mean, I've seen many places all over the world that in front of the schools we have 30 kilometers an hour or 20 miles. Why do we have 20 miles an hour in front of the schools? Because it works. It's safer. But do we want our children to be safe only in front of the school or everywhere? Why don't we have 20 miles an hour everywhere? I mean, walking and cycling is not a frivolity. When you go to any city, the walking, cycling, and public transit infrastructure is the symbol of the respect that we have for people. If we want to improve walkability in the Twin Cities, lower the speed below 20 miles an hour everywhere except the arterials. In the arterials have 30 or 40 or 50, still lower a little bit, but where people in the residential, 20 miles an hour. And this, not just because it rhymes, 20 is plenty. Maybe I should have remembered. Last night they invited me to this bar, Amsterdam, and they asked me to do some sentence and to rhyme. That's what I should have done, 20 is plenty. But I just went blank. But look at this. If you get hit by a car at 20 miles an hour, 5% probability of being killed. If you get hit at 40, 80%. And no one disputes this. There are many, many studies they show in kilometers, in miles, whatever, same thing. So it's very important. Also, because it's not only the probability of being killed, but if someone is driving at 20 miles an hour, also there is less probability that they're going to hit someone. And not just putting up signs, putting up barriers and narrowing the streets, but also it's because it's going to be much more enjoyable. When we're walking the dog and the cars are going by at 20, we feel at ease. When the cars are going at 40 or 50, it's not a comfortable walk. And the kids can learn how to ride their bikes. And it's totally different. I mean, in the UK, already 12 million people live in 20 mile an hour communities. Not one street, the whole community. Because in New York and Chicago, now they're starting to move complete neighborhoods in that direction. This is how it's in London now. This is how it's in Paris, 40% of the people. So it's moving in that direction. I mean, we know how to eliminate the pedestrians, the deaths, or the accidents. We know that when we did the roads for cars, we didn't put a small island in the middle. And if we put a small island, we reduce by 56% the accidents. It should be mandatory that every crosswalk should have a small island in the middle. What if your son or daughter or parents get killed in the intersection and you knew that if it had a small island, half of the accident would have been avoided? And if we want to improve bikeability, and today we're here about sustainable mobility, if we want to improve bikeability, I mean, we also got to listen to the children. They're pretty smart. I mean, what do? I mean, cities try to do things right, but many are not doing the right things. So I think that you got to do two things. Either you do the nice to have or the must have. What are the nice to have? Things that makes you feel good, but don't get new cyclists. Like putting up signs and bicycle parking and bicycle lockers and teaching how to ride, and every year they do new maps and bicycle racks on the buses. I mean, our expectations are so low that in Toronto, when the city moved the line from here to here, 40 centimeters, so about 3 feet, the cyclist union organized a party for the city staff. I have photos of the city staff drinking champagne for this stupidity. This is not having respect for the cyclist. I mean, having these sharrows that no one follows. So this is what cities do. Why do cities do? Because it's easy to do. All you need is a checkbook. So you write a check, you get bike racks. You got a check, you get a map. And also, no one gets upset. It doesn't take any guts or any vision to do it. It takes guts is when you have a row of parked cars and you say, guys, sorry, now I'm going to move this parking and now I'm going to put a protected bike lane. Then that's why. So, I mean, think of a person that you know that doesn't bike on the roads. It might be you. It might be your children, your parents. Would that person start biking on the road if you put signage or maps or bicycle parking or racks? No. Only two things. Only two things. If you really want to improve cycling in the Twin Cities, by the way, I know that Minneapolis, someone said, oh, we are the #1 in the U.S. You know, you should be wishing that you had been number 57th. Because then you could go to the politician and say, oh, we're 57, we got to do better. But when you think you are the best, but once again, if you want to compare yourself with Houston, don't do anything about cycling. You're going to be better for the next 100 years. But you got to compare yourself with Copenhagen, with Amsterdam, with Berlin, with Portland, with Vancouver. I mean, you got everything. St. Paul and Minneapolis, you have great universities, great people, a lot of consciousness around. So you got to think big. For example, Vancouver says we're going to be the most sustainable city in the world. They didn't say it in the metro area. They didn't say it even at the provincial or state level, not even at the country level. They said by 2020. Not 100 years, no, 2020. And they have 11 different measures, and they are moving forward year after year, month after month, with very specific tasks. So what are the twin cities going to be, or what is separate? Maybe each twin has a different goal. Maybe one wants to be the healthiest city in the US. Maybe the other one wants to be the best in mobility. But think big, a big goal that will get everybody, the private sector and public and schools and everybody. Only two things work to cycling. One is we gotta lower the speed in the neighborhoods. Two, we gotta create protected networks for cyclists. We need to separate the pedestrians from the cyclists from the cars, and we gotta think worst case scenario, it's night and it's snowing or it's raining. In Montreal, they used to have painted lines. Only young people used to bike. Now they have protected bikeways, and you see families, and you see children, and old people, and novice, and everybody. This is Paris, beautiful sidewalks, and this is Mexico City, in Vancouver. So many cities are moving this way. So don't waste your time in this nice to have. Focus on the must have. Something that is very important. Focus on the minimum grid. When you go to politicians, don't ask them for a bike lane. Ask them for a minimum grid. Because sometimes, now we're having elections in Toronto. There are 44 wards, 44 councillors. And they used to go to every councillor and say, oh, we need this road, or we need this street. It's going to take us 100 years if we're doing street by street. So I was able to convince the Cyclists Union to not go street by street, but ask for the minimum grid. What is the minimum grid? You gotta have the city. So in the neighborhoods, lower the speed below 20 miles an hour. But you need to create a grid that will connect you. So maybe you say in St. Paul, we need 400 miles, ideally. But the minimum grid of protected byways might be 200. So go and tell your elected officials, are you for the minimum grid? Oh, but I'm going to give you maps. No, I'm not talking about maps. It's the minimum grid. Are you for the minimum grid? No, I'm going to give you bicycle parking. No, I'm not talking about bike parking. Oh, but half of our buses have racks. I'm not talking about racks. I'm talking about the minimum grid, something simple. Minimum grid. A minimum grid is only of protected bikeways or bike boulevards. So in the neighborhoods, if you lower the speed below 20 and you put bumps and road diets and whatever, that counts as part of the minimum grid. But you got to have a minimum grid. I mean, it's like the power grid. All of a sudden, you are not going to do the power grid and say, oh, in this neighborhood, yes. In the next neighborhood, no power for them. And the next one, we don't know. Same thing with the sewage or the water. You need to have a grid. The cyclists also need a grid to flow across the city. And I know, in Calgary, they did one bikeway, protected bikeway. And then they were telling the mayor, people are not using it. What a waste of money. 2 weeks ago, the mayor said, of course, the numbers are low because there is no cycle track network. So last Monday, a week ago from yesterday, the city approved a grid in their downtown. So now they're going to have a grid. Some people are going to tell you, like this morning when I was in Bloomington, they say, oh, but it's hard. How do you convince people to create a bike grid if they don't see the cyclist? Well, this is my friend Mike. He builds bridges. When he's building bridges, no one is asking Mike, hey, Mike, how do you justify the bridge? How many people are swimming across the river? If there is no bridge, there is no people. So, same thing happened with the cyclists. If there is not a grid of protected byways, then you don't see the cyclists. But nevertheless, they go out and they do the bridge based on latent demand. Walking and cycling is not a frivolity. Walking and cycling is not a joke. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for most people. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for every child and youth around the world. It can be the wealthiest, the poorest. It can be fat or skinny or tall or short. If they're under 16, their only individual mode of mobility is to walk or to bike. So safe walking and biking should be a right. A human right, the right to mobility. Unless you think that only the people that have the money and the age and the desire to drive a car have a right to individual mobility. And if you take away the word individual, then walking, cycling, and public transit should be a right. to get around. That's why we're also talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability, because everything is related to everything. Let me tell you, in my previous life, when I was commissioner in Bogota, I'm not saying that Bogota is better than the Twin Cities. I'm not crazy. Unfortunately, it's decades behind. But it's much poorer. Has about 1/6 per capita income. So I want to show you some of the things that we did. For example, we built, in one term when I was in the administration, we built 2 metropolitan parks and over 200 neighborhood parks. This park, the Pope came here, gave a mass. By the way, some of you might tweet the Pope. The Pope today said that great communities it sounded like an 880 cities quote. It's the best one ever. He said, great cities are the ones that take care of their children and their elderly. I said, oh my God, Pope. And well, another Pope before him came here, 1 million people. And then in 27 years, nothing happened. Why? Because sometimes it's hard to do things. And then there were not even sidewalks or anything. But I learned something, that the citizens pay us in the government to get things done. Not to have too many excuses why things cannot be done. So if you work in the government, you gotta become a champion at finding solutions to the problem and not at finding problems to the solution. And that's why we went from this, in 27 years like this, in 3 years to this. And we built bikeways and sidewalks. There was nothing. We built places to run and to walk and to do mountain biking, areas for concerts and wave pools. Things that people can do at their own pace, at their own time. It's creating all of it. So it was quite exciting time. And it's very, very well used. The ciclovia, what is the ciclovia? Well, here you have open streets. It's a great concept. You open the streets to the people and close them to cars. And I know that in Minneapolis you have the open streets, which helps to change mindsets. That the streets are not just for cars. That the streets can have different uses according to the time of the day of the year. But here, again, benchmark against the best ones. Now that you got open streets going, now you got to do it every week from May to September. From May to September. Because then you get the health benefits. We're working now with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation on how to promote open streets across the U.S. But as a healthy practice, gotta be at least 10 miles or longer because people want to walk or run or bike, so it cannot be just 1 mile. It gotta be week after week so that all of a sudden you get the benefits. I mean, we get over 1 million people every Sunday of the year. This was what the Japanese Corporation Agency were proposing, elevated highways, $10 billion. Thank God we said no. This is what transit used to look like. And when my brother was mayor, people thought he was crazy. He said it's gonna be like a subway but above ground and 1/20th of the cost. Well, they did it in 3 years. And this moves more people than 90% of the subways in the world at 1/20th of the cost. So but again, the connectivity with people walking, the connectivity with people cycling, because people gotta get to the green line, people gotta get to the blue lines. Of course, you can have feeder buses, but it's a lot cheaper if people walk or people bike. Also, it's better for health because people got to do their 30 minutes a day. Well, they do 10 minutes to go to the green line, then 10 minutes from the green line to work. In the afternoon, they do the same. By the night, they have done their 30 minutes a day. Now I work with the 880, and one of the things I love is being able to come here and chat with you and learn. I learned this morning at the big center. This afternoon, I'm going to a low-income neighborhood. In the evening, to a very wealthy place. I've been working at over 150 cities in the last 8 years. And one of the things I learned is that Einstein was right when he said we cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. I mean, if you were living in Copenhagen, it would be okay because in the next 30 years, they're going to grow by 5,000 people. Nothing. But it would be also so boring, can you imagine? Everything is pretty much done. You got the parks and the plazas and the walkways. Instead here in the US, in North America, we got such a great opportunity. We're going to grow by 33%, by 130 million people. How are we going to live? It's exciting, so much more exciting. But we got to do things differently. We got to be bold. So like we can have a transit stop, the green line, the blue line is nice if we just got the transit stop, but what if we have a water fountain and a table to play chess and we sell coffee and flowers and so on? It becomes a great place. This is what placemaking is about, how to create great places for everybody. Every transit stop is an opportunity to create a great place. Project for Public Spaces in New York, they've done a lot of work around placemaking. They go to places like New Haven, Connecticut, a street corner that you wouldn't want to spend a second. It was dark and dangerous. They go with a blank page. And they ask, what do you want? The citizens are the experts. Listen to the citizens. They say, get rid of the first 2 cars. Why? Just that you can widen the sidewalk. Why do you need a wide sidewalk? To put a tree, to put a bench, to put a garbage. Well, they came with 100 ideas. All of a sudden, a place that you wouldn't want to spend a second became a destination place. And if you got a nice corner like this, it's okay. But if you got 5, you got a nice street. And if you got 20, you got a nice neighborhood. I mean, in Suwon, we've been working for 3 years with Mayor Young. He wanted to show citizens what a city looks like without cars. So we chose one neighborhood, 30 days, no cars. And that was last September. And we partnered with some people, and it went very, very well. Here we were training all his senior staffs and commissioners. Part of it is hardware, part of it is software, part of it is infrastructure. And we were moving along, and it's fine. I mean, Paris, now you got the nice bikes here. In Paris, 7 years ago, they didn't even know what a public bike was. Things are changing. 7 years ago. And now they got Velib everywhere. 1,451 stations of Velibs. Where did they put it? On the streets. This mayor really has a lot of guts. He eliminated over 5,000 car parking. You think it was easy? No, it was tough. But if he wanted to put here 40 bikes, he had to take away 4 or 5 cars. And now they got 180,000 bike rides every day on these Velibs. I mean, let's thank those engineers. Remember what I told you? The old mentality are at the museum. I mean, in San Francisco, the earthquake got rid of the highway. They created a committee to set up the new one. Thank God they had a committee because it never happened. And now they got this. Last year in Rio de Janeiro, now it wasn't an earthquake, it was the people. They tore down an elevated highway. This is in Seoul, in South Korea. There used to be a river going through the middle. They built 6 lanes. It got full. What did they do? An elevator, a 2nd floor. What did they want? A 3rd floor. The mayor tore it down. And for the politicians, this worked because he was mayor, and then he was elected president of South Korea. And he created a wonderful innovation. He knows the only way to solve mobility is through public transit and walking and cycling. So we got to create great cities. I mean, if we create great places, we get a bonus. We're going to have cleaner air. Walking, cycling, and transit has fewer gas emissions than any other mode. It's going to improve mobility by itself. We know here, not everybody drives. Also, it's going to make transit better because people walk to transit or people bike to transit. It's going to make us healthier. Is this what the future looks like? You know, the issue of obesity in the US, 1 out of 3 people are obese, 1 out of 3 overweight, only 1 out of 3 have a normal weight. We got to get people walking and cycling because if people walk or bike, the rates of obesity are much lower. Or if people take public transit as well. And if we just do 30 minutes a day, it's like the wonder drug, according to the head director of the CDC. And public transit is another wonder drug because people got to walk to public transit and they do the 30 minutes. It's going to be great for economic development. We keep saying, oh, let's buy local. Well, when you are walking or cycling, how much can you, or taking public transit, how much can you carry for 2 or 3 days? So you buy local. When you have a car, you buy for 2 or 3 weeks. So you go to the big box stores. It's great for the personal income. I know that you're going to find some people that say, I don't care about the health, I don't care about the environment. What's in it for me? So those selfish people, tell them, you want to be a millionaire? Tell them a secret. In the US, the 2-car households spend 25 to 30% of the income on mobility. 25% to 30%. That's 1 out of every $4. No wonder people don't have money for education or vacations or retirement. I mean, not even to go to dinner with their family. This is crazy. I mean, the 2-car households would spend only 5% if they downsized to no cars. I mean, there is nothing that the government, municipal, state, nothing that any government can do that would have a higher impact on the personal income and on the community income than to allow people to downsize from 2 cars to 1 or from 1 to 0. Nothing. Can you imagine? I mean, the average household income in the US is about $72,000. Half of it is pretty fixed. It's food and shelter. So there is nothing you can do with that, food and shelter. The other half is for vacations and health and clothing and retirement and so on, and also for mobility. So if this two-car household, not according to me, according to the AAA, that they promote use of cars, so they would be interested in showing low cost. And according to them, the cost of one car is $9,122. Two cars, $18,000, including depreciation and the cost and insurance and so on. So no wonder if you got a two-car household, there is not enough money for all of that. You're spending $18,000 on that. If you got one car, and then, so if a two-car household, for all of the expenses except food and shelter, the two-car household has $17,000. The one car has $26,000. The zero car has $34,000. Can you imagine? And what happens if all of a sudden, I mean, and it's not something totally out of our mind. You know, this has so much impact in the local economy. Look, this is from Washington, D.C. It's not Copenhagen. No, Washington, D.C. decreased by 15,000 cars. Of the total value of the car, they thought 1,300 stays locally. The guy putting the gas, the maintenance, the work. 7,000 goes away to the car being made in China or whatever, but not in Washington. So 15,000 cars is putting into the local economy 127 million. Year after year, every year. Can you imagine so that's why I say not only for them, for the local economy. What do you do if all of a sudden you got $7,000 every year that you didn't have? You go to the restaurants, you go to the bars, you go to the hockey game, you improve your basement, your garden. It stays in the local economy. So all of this, and I'm going to hurry up, all of this is about how do we want to live. And I know there is change ahead. I mean, I'm going to tell you one more thing about Copenhagen, but I know you're going to say, no, Gil, don't tell us about Copenhagen. In the Twin Cities, we're different. We got nothing in common with Copenhagen or Bogota or New York. We are unique. I know that you are unique. You are absolutely unique, just like everyone else. Everything that I'm showing is applicable to the Twin Cities, but not if we have a narrow mind and we think that it's on the computer, that we copy and paste. No, it's not about copying. It's about how to adapt and improve. It's not about copying, nothing. Not even, you shouldn't even be copying St. Paul, what Minneapolis is doing, or in Minneapolis what St. Paul. Each neighborhood is different, each street is different. But I'm going to end by giving you 5 examples of how to move from talking to doing. Sense of urgency. I mean, sense of urgency, if this didn't give you a sense of urgency, what's going to give you a sense of urgency? I mean, the fact that you're going to grow by 130 million people. I mean, when we design the cities around cars, what do we get? More cars. And then we have to invite our friends to help us cross the street. But what do? Then we start building more roads. As if this had solved the mobility problems in LA or in Houston. It's not an issue of just of gas. These cars will be running on air. There is not enough space. So building more roads to solve mobility is like trying to put out a fire using gasoline. It doesn't work. But if we define the city around people, we're going to get healthier and happier people. And that's the challenge. That's the possibility. That's the opportunity of the Twin Cities. Improving quality of life, because through quality of life, you're going to attract and retain the best people. And quality of life is the most important tool of economic competitiveness. Second, political will. And I know that people are doing things, but many times at the speed of the turtle. And we got to go faster. And you remember what I said about benchmarking? They say, oh, I might be slow, but I'm ahead of you. I know that you're ahead of 1,000 cities, or 2,000, or 3,000 cities. But you got 100 that are better than you, so how to get better than those 100? I mean, I know change is hard. In Copenhagen, that has about the population, when they were going to create the first pedestrian street, they said, what, a street for people walking? We got too many cars, and the weather is horrible. It's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer. But the main issue, they said, we don't want pedestrian streets because that's for the Italians. The Italians, they're loud and noisy, and they like to be on the street. But we are Scandinavian, and we are shy, and we don't go out. I know many of you are descendants of Scandinavians. But guess what? Your fellows that stayed in Denmark, now they're more Italian than the Italians. They love their pedestrian streets. In the rain, in the summer, in the winter. This is City Hall in Copenhagen. We remember a car invasion to people places. And all of that, the first pedestrian street. But having the clarity, having the proper facilities, thinking of the 8 and the 80 and everyone. Why do they bike? Is it because environmental reasons? Only 1%. Mostly it's because it's safe, it's fast, and it's convenient. What is safe, fast, and convenient? That it has a physical separation for the pedestrians, for the bikes, and for the cars. Not when they're going through the middle of the park, but anytime that they're on the road, there is a physical separation. Always unilateral. The slowest the pedestrian, then the cyclist, unilateral, then the parked cars. And then they continue. Whether it's raining or snowing or whatever. See, at one level is for the cars, then about 3 inches higher for the cyclists, and another 3 inches higher for the pedestrian. 3, we gotta have leadership. Leadership, and not all these world leaders. Leadership, like this friend who's a physical education teacher. She saw every year fewer kids were walking to school. So she said, why do you walk to school? They said, because we're afraid of the cars. So when the kids were home on vacation, they came back and she was dressed up as a pylon. She shut down the parking lot, and then at minus 24 degrees, the kids started to walk and to bike. So we need hundreds of Ann Fentons, because this is part of her. But in the schools, in the business, in the community, everywhere, we need doers. People said nothing can happen in New York because of the mafias and the politicians and the taxi drivers. Well, 2 women transform all of that. Actually, I thought nothing was going to happen in New York, so the only way to see New York from the street was to run the marathon. And then that's why, but these women are transforming New York. And look at this. The Commissioner of Transportation, Janet Sarikan, for 8 years, and Amanda Burton, another 8. Broadway, as a street that have painted lines. Who uses the painted lines? The cars and the kamikazes. They started taking space away, not from the pedestrian, not 1 inch from the pedestrian, from the cars. And creating protected bikeways, and creating just umbrellas and chairs and tables. It's being bold. That's why you gotta challenge yourselves, because you gotta be much better than the New Yorks and the Portlands and so on. Times Square, if 5 years ago you would have told anyone in New York that Times Square was gonna be pedestrian, they would have thought you were crazy. Well, they made it pedestrian. No, they didn't take away 1 lane or 2. It wasn't even a square or anything. It was just a gigantic parking lot. And now it's full of people. And businesses are thriving and people are doing good. By the way, 28% of the people are still against it. When I was saying change doesn't happen by unanimity. No, 72% of the people like it, but 28% still don't like it. So, but you gotta do whatever you think is right. What a change of mindset. The DOT organizing yoga and Tai Chi at Times Square. This is a revolution. I mean, and it's not just these big things that they did in Times Square. Lots of these little ones, like this one that improved the life for the pedestrians and the cyclists. And the last point is public engagement. We got to engage these citizens, because I see many, many times we invest millions in improving the public spaces, but then we don't spend the thousands to make it work. So we got to work with the citizens and find out how to create areas. So all of a sudden we got parking lots for transit. Okay, on Saturdays and Sundays not being used. Let's do a farmer's market. Let's have people dancing on the streets. Let's do all kinds of other activities. The management of public places is absolutely critical. That's one of the things that we work as the citizens. They come with hundreds of ideas. So I want to end by saying, let's think outside the box. I mean, placemaking, through placemaking, let's create great cities for everyone. It's a time to build alliances between the municipality, between the 2 cities, the twin cities, but also the metro area, between the state and the federal government, the public sector and the private and the NGOs, departments of transportation and planning, but also public health and education and everybody. You got some challenges, but much more than challenges, what you have here in the Twin Cities is opportunities. But keep in mind, don't let anybody tell you it's not a financial issue, it's not a technical issue. It's a political issue. That's why everybody has to get involved. It's an issue for everyone. I mean, in so many ways, cities have been working on getting the ducks in the row. And that's what that used to work in the past, getting the ducks in the row. But it was about doing things right. But what if all of a sudden you're doing a street that doesn't have a sidewalk, or that the intersection is not safe? And then you say, oh, I'm doing it better, cheaper, faster. No. Now it's not enough to do things right. Now we also got to do the right things. So I want to thank you for coming here. You know, today we talk about placemaking and creating great cities. We talk about cycling and parks and sidewalks. But tomorrow we got to walk the talk. I wish you all the very best, and thank you very much. that's our website. We're an NGO, a not-for-profit. We got lots of videos, documents, things. Everything is free, and you can send us also information, and we have a monthly newsletter. So welcome to. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. A special thank to our host, to our sponsors, and to Mr. Penalosa. Can we have another round of applause? And before we go, just 3 quick reminders. First is our next public affairs series is June 25th. We've invited several members of our East Metro legislative delegation. And then second, we're having a golf tournament on June 2nd. We encourage you to register for that at stpaulchamber.com. And then finally, there's some brochures in the hallway regarding the residency. I encourage you to pick those up. And then have a great week and cheer on the Minnesota Wild tonight.